KDE has this amazing feature that I've been using since the start, and it's not necessarily that new or like different. It's called virtual desktops, and yeah, as you can see by looking at here, I use 16 of them. You're probably gonna say, okay, do you really need all 16? Turns out, yeah, I do. There have been times where like only one was left and all the others I used. And by default, I don't have a convenient way of showing you what all of my desktops have, so let me just say it. So the first, second, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are occupied. 9, 10, 11 are not currently, but they can be. 9 is usually for books. 10 is for an extra project that I'm working on, or rather an extra project. Then 11 doesn't have some specific purpose. 12 is for settings, and yeah, Virtual Desktop 12 is specifically for settings, system settings, mind you. 11, or rather 13, yeah, 13 is either for Steam plus game or for OBS plus chat. Then we have here, which is like what, 14, specifically for Anki. This, the 15th, is generally reserved for Blender or GIMP, what I use for making thumbnails and editing videos, like maybe once a month. I really hate editing. And the last one is generally for watching videos that I have downloaded, whether it be from YouTube using YTDLP or watching anime that I have downloaded. It's usually going to be here. The first one is VS Code, then a general browser window, then browser window for social stuff, so Discord, Mastodon, Telegram, and VK. And the fourth one is specifically for YouTube or other consuming content, maybe like movies, reading manga, in this case, streaming. So yeah, I actually do use all of them. And it's probably like a hassle to get around them, right? Let's get into the settings. Let's sacrifice the rook. I wonder if anyone knows this reference. It would be really cool. Let's go into the settings and look at all the different hotkeys that we can set for working with multiple virtual desktops. Let's scroll quite a bit until we recognize those that I actually use. Since a lot of them I don't use, I won't be able to give you any useful advice on them, so if I'm skipping something, it's not necessarily because it's useless, but because it's useless for me. Yeah. Like for example, this might be useful, and I'll look into it. Let me actually write this down. Move zoomed area. Okay. Alright, so we got to what I use. So there are these 4 hotkeys that you can set to switch one desktop down, left, right, or up. So the widget at the top left that I have is actually very important. At first, I was like, whatever, but it's actually incredibly helpful in helping you like find your place around 16 desktops. Maybe you won't have 16 of them, to be fair, but I personally do, and this pager widget has helped me a lot. let me show you how to add it. You do enter, you add widgets, and then is it going to be called, I'm pretty sure literally pager. Yeah, pager. That's exactly what it's called. So on there, it displays the desktop that you're currently on with your accent color, as well as all the other desktops and what they're filled in with. So if you can see, and it's pretty hard to see if you're on phone, it's probably just straight up impossible. Sorry about that, but the 16th desktop, we can see it's mostly black, mostly like transparent, and a line at the bottom. That means that there's this window at the bottom and nothing else, essentially. It's so small that it's not necessarily useful, but sometimes you can tell some things, kind of like background vision. Is that a real term? Essentially, when it's not like you're looking at something precisely at it, it's more like you're seeing it like very on the right or left of your vision. So you can kind of process it with your brain, but you don't really see it, you know? It's a similar kind of feeling with this widget. Yeah, so this widget lets you use these for hotkeys very effectively, where you can just set what was to be, used to be for me, Windows Alt and then HJKL, because I am a Vim user, and then I could just press them all over the place to travel through my 16 desktops. And that is the reason why Anki I love how this circle just moved with us. That's the reason why Anki is in this weird place in the, let me count, 14th desktop. So the first few desktops are all taken. Then we have like a drought of desktops. Consider that this window is usually not there, and neither is this one. And boom, Anki. Why did I do it this way? That's because with like directional hotkeys, what you could do is while being on this window, you could say, oh, move to the desktop on the down. Basically move down, and it would end you up here. And here you could alternatively say, move me up, and it would move you here. So, usually when I'm adding new cards to Anki, it's likely from the browser, not necessarily, but usually there. I guess that's the case for me because I've been adding an extreme amount of Terraria cards. I've added every single crafting recipe of all furniture, or all like furniture that has a single type. So like all tables, all chairs, all lanterns, all candles, and so on and so on and so on. So that was from the browser. And being able to move like that, like very easily, is very, very nice. But what if I wanted to go to this desktop, for example? It's the... I'm not sure that numbers are going to help you, but maybe they will, to be fair. It is 8, 9, it's the 10th desktop. How do I get here? So I'm generally in the top row. So no matter what I do, I have to move twice to get to this desktop. So I'm kind of unlikely to use it. It's like the last in line to actually being used. I found this to be a problem. even though I had a bunch of other hotkeys on the same right side with the meta modifier, which is Windows, but I don't like calling it Windows, so I call it meta now. Yeah, having to move multiple times to get to some place bothered me. So let's get to the other hotkeys that are there. They're very useful by all accounts, but you can also set a hotkey to each desktop specifically. So you can have hotkeys to go to the first one, the 16th one, and up to 20. And your first thought will probably be, oh, it's like the hotkeys I would use is meta plus numbers, right? So, or maybe meta alt plus numbers is probably more so your first thought, or some other modifier. Because by default, I think meta plus numbers just activates these apps, and that's irrelevant for me because I use Cronkite, and I can just, you know, so I don't need it. So maybe you're like, okay, meta alt plus numbers, and let's say you're also insane like me. I should stop saying insane when I really mean autistic. Maybe you're autistic like me and you want to have 16 desktops because it feels very specifically good to you, for reasons that I could be explaining for another 2 hours. Maybe I'll get to it eventually. So for the other 10 desktops, so we have meta 1 through 0 is desktops 1 through 10, and for the other 10, for me it was meta control. Oh, meta is not recognized on this thingy, huh? But it is if... Interesting. Okay, huh. Did not know this. I just added like new setting to screen key to show my mouse so that you can like see how I'm drawing. It's very hard to see that I'm pressing shift there, but maybe like you'll get used to it or something. I'm sorry, I could make it like bigger, I guess, but then it's like an even bigger distraction, and I'm not sure if it's worth it. But I honestly don't know. It's really like up to you what you like more as a community. What was I talking about? Yeah, so and meta control plus numbers, so 1 through 0 is desktops 10 through 20. That is a very reasonable approach to have with these hotkeys. Like you kind of like see them and you're immediately, oh, this just makes sense to append to numbers, right? Especially considering that all of these hotkeys have numbers in them. How do I switch to desktop 1? Well, duh, I use the 1 key. But as you've saw, what? As you've seen already, trying to remember which desktop is which number, at least for me, is really difficult. So I need to go to Spotify, for example, right? I know, and I'm like very comfortable in the like fact that Spotify is here, but I have no idea, or at least it would take me a second, maybe even two, to remember what desktop that actually is. I have eventually learned that that is desktop 7, but it was really difficult, honestly. I knew where it was positionally, but putting a number on it, no clue. And I still have no clue what number this one is. 10, apparently. So putting numbers on there didn't really help. If I ever needed to go to Anki, for example, I only recently learned, because I actively tried to learn that it's on desktop 14. I did not know that beforehand, and I've been using this feature ever since I switched to Linux, which is like 2 or 3 months now, maybe even 4. I have it written down somewhere. Yeah, so numbers make sense, but they're not very usable. And I got this bright idea today. What if I mimic the idea of rows? So let me actually draw this. We have 16, right? Let's split this, actually with a different color for no reason. Let's have a drawing session. And then here, I'm very bad with the mouse, so I'm not drawing very well. But yeah, we have 16 desktops here. What if we have hotkeys that are also 4, like by 4, and have them be on the right side, so meta plus them is very easy to press. Sounds very nice to me. So what I decided is that this, the first desktop, is meta U, and then, oops, wrong color, I, O, P. So I hold down the meta key, I just move my hands up because, well, I touch type, and now I have easy to comprehend access to the first 4 desktops. It's very simple. I don't need to count. I can just look here and see that, oh, the third finger basically needs to press the key. I'm like, oh, okay, and I immediately go to it like this. And it's very simple. Wait, where were we? I think here? Yeah. Then it would probably make sense to use JKL semicolon for the other ones, but I already used them in Cronkite to switch active windows, so I couldn't really use that because it's like too core of a mechanic to be used for something like this. So I decided instead to use the lower keys, which is M, comma, like this. It's a terrible comma. Yeah, let's do it like this. Yeah. Okay, that's a bit better, I think. Period and slash. So I need to go to the downer, I guess, desktops, and boom, I just move my hand down, and the same idea applies here. Very simple. Okay, what do we do with the other 2 sets? We use these, let's try to use this color. We use these 2 sets again, but now not just meta, but meta alt. I swear I fed my cats, and yet they're still meowing. Yeah, I'm confident now that they react to me like talking a lot, which I don't usually do. And they're like, oh wow, she's alive. Yeah, so same idea. We essentially copy all of them onto the last 2 rows, but now also pressing Alt. So we still have the idea of a reasonable enough idea that the last 2 rows are a bit more specialized and therefore not as needed, like not as often. And the first 2 rows are most commonly used and should be more easily accessible. And I've tried it out. I literally did this change an hour ago. And wow, and is so much better. The numbers thing I never really used because it was so hard to figure out where anything is, but this kind of like mnemonic system works so much better that now I can easily go specifically to a desktop that I actually want. Hold up. That's fine. Rather than having to travel, sometimes a ridiculous amount where it feels like really inefficient. See, because of the nice like animations, they probably don't look very nice to you, considering like 30 FPS. And they don't look very good to me, to be fair. They're not like extremely smooth. My computer is not like a beast. You're welcome. But like they feel kind of nice, you know? But when you press like a few keys to go through like 8 desktops in a row, it starts to feel kind of bad. But say I want to go to Anki, boom, I know it. I immediately went to the window. I still have the nice animation that makes me feel nice, but in a more efficient manner, which also makes me feel even nicer. Marvelous, right? So now I can move very easily to any desktop. Now this desktop, for example, which used to be hard to access, is very easy to access now. I can put anything here and it's going to be a reasonable place because it's going to be as easy to get to as any other place. Makes me remember I should probably make YouTube chat Groovebox. I'll make the background use the same background that my VS Code uses, and the text is going to be, well, similar thing, and like uses the white that VS Code uses. Just got the idea. That's cool. Next stream, or the one after, or eventually once I do it, your guys are going to look even better. I did a lot of work on fucking YouTube chat. It's all streamed, mostly. Like, yeah, pretty much everything I did with YouTube chat, I have in VODs, which are public. By default, YouTube chat looks fucking horrendous. It's so bad. It's like surprising. They really tried to make it like horrible as a chat window. And the fucking minimum size thing is like, it's not even on the root element. So usually, I'm not that good at HTML or CSS. I know the basics. I don't have enough experience to be like absolutely smooth with it, right? But I'm pretty sure, say you make a web app that then becomes its own OS window, kind of like YouTube chat or a browser, and the way you set a minimum size for that window is by setting some element in there to have a minimum size. And usually you would just put like minimum size CSS property on the HTML element, so almost the highest one, right? And you would set the minimum width there. Reasonable. But what YouTube chat did instead is that it put that minimum size, I don't remember if it's width or height, maybe both, on some random, like very specific element that actually didn't need to have a minimum size because it actually worked regardless, even without it. And it took me a lot of effort to make YouTube chat properly resizable. Yeah. So, moving, right? What we can also do is look at more hotkeys. Trying to find what I used to use. Yeah, so the same way we can move to different desktops in directions, we can also move windows to different desktops in directions, and that's also what I used to use, and it's been the same exact way, not that efficient, if it's the only thing that you're using, that is. And to move windows to different desktops, I used to use Meta Alt and then numbers, and then Meta Control Alt and numbers for 10 up, right? And it's similarly useless because what the fuck is desktop 13? I think it's this one. I'm pretty sure. But like, it's not obvious to me, you know? So now Meta Control and all the hotkeys that I showed you that I use for moving everywhere, just gonna show them to you. We can use now Meta Control and those same hotkeys to move the current window to that desktop, and we add Alt if it's like the second set, basically. I'm not lying to you, right? Yeah, I'm not lying. So that similarly makes it way easier to move windows to certain desktops. If, for example, say you're here and you open some window and you realize that you want to get to it a bit later, well, you could very easily just boom, switch to it, and then move it to somewhere else, like for example here. That's exactly what I expected. It sounds like I'm lying, but I wanted to test this. The chat window is actually on all desktops, so like it wouldn't make sense if it actually moved, because it's already there, you know? So yeah, and I'm not actually going to, well, I could open a new window, say this, and move it here. The cool thing about it is that even though you move that window, you yourself don't move. You then get to decide whether you want to move as well or not, making it like really nice. You can just basically put the window to your watch later playlist. And when you move windows directionally, you also move, which obviously makes sense for the feature. But having to move, in a sense, is also like unfortunate, I would say. Yeah. So those are my new hotkeys for working with virtual desktops, and an explanation for why I prefer them now. But in place of those hotkeys that are currently now here, I used to have other actions. For example, Meta I used to bring up a temporary terminal, and I can't use it on that hotkey anymore. So I moved some of them. So I'm still learning them. They make sense for the most part, so I'll probably remember them automatically. But like still, it's something that takes time, and it's something that I love Anki for, because I just added all of those new hotkeys that I set that are difficult to immediately get with your head all at once and start using them effectively. But if you just give that all to Anki, you have a guarantee that you will remember all of them in a better fashion than you could otherwise, just naturally. Anki is so good. I have so many branches of speech. That's actually how I talk. That's wild. So, I moved a few hotkeys here and there. Meta semicolon is still my K runner. It feels really good to me because it's semicolon is always on my right pinky, so boom, it's very easy. And in a similar sense, something that I use really often is emojis. So I put my emoji picker here for if I don't remember the Unicode, because I'm not sure if I told you guys this, I started memorizing Unicodes for emojis that I use most often. So 1F480 is the skull emoji, for example. 1F97A is the pleading emoji. What else do I remember? D9E is the Amogus symbol. I'm gonna let you copy it because it's funny. What else do I remember? 1F922 is the vomit emoji. It's technically nauseous emoji, but I call it vomit. Funnily enough, because this emoji looks better than the vomit emoji. Who could have known? And I'm still like kinda starting to learn Unicodes, or rather memorize them. I memorized a few, but there's still a lot more to go. I generally take one per day, so I memorize one per day and then try to continue remembering them. So for those that I haven't yet memorized, I use my emoji picker still. So it's now on meta alt semicolon. Makes sense because it's also something that I use really often, and having it in a similar sense, so K runner, feels kind of like a terminal. Not really, it's like a pop-out terminal that you bring out to do a single thing and then you're gone. It's a very similar idea to the Unicode picker. You do boom, boom, you're done. You know, it's a very similar idea. So adding an extra modifier there to kind of complexify the action, while the idea of the action is still very similar. You know, like, makes a lot of sense. Then there are rare cases when I have floating windows and I can no longer use this to get to the other windows, which is why I have this to be able to pick. I can do chat. And let me actually give you an example by showing you off another hotkey that I moved. This thingy that lets me type. And the use case is we resize it to a more reasonable size and we move it. How do I activate the other windows now? Sometimes this works, like now for example, but it doesn't always. And that is exactly when I would do something like this, boom. And I also can activate it back to close it, for example, which I underuse and I probably should. Yeah. So that is, look at Windows in the current desktop for this kind of hyper-specific issue. Maybe even a bug, probably not. Maybe I would call it an underwork. Because I wish it would do that. I wish it had that functionality, but it doesn't, and it's probably by design, you know? So I call it an underwork, or a split of direction, because my direction of Cronkite, the tiling window manager that I use on KDE, I imagine they didn't think how I'm currently thinking, that I should be able to use HJKL to move from even floating windows, but I can't unfortunately, so I have this. Also, I have this, which I don't use for a good reason because I can just search for windows through my KRunner. So this lets me type in a window, for example, VS Code, right? And it gets me to look at the windows and then go to one of them throughout all of the desktops. The thing about it is that, first of all, generally, desktops have one window per desktop, and those who don't, I won't really remember what window is on there, but I'll remember the activity, I guess you could say, that's on there. Say I'm like editing a video or something. My brain will process correctly that this, like the desktop in this place, has this kind of action, has this kind of feel to it. It will take me more time to remember that Blender, the window, is on this desktop, 15. It's like more difficult to me. And I mentioned this for some reason. Hold up. Shit, I forgot. Why did I mention this? Does anyone remember? I forgot Lamau. That's hilarious. Let me try to remember. Yeah. I remembered. Right, so when I want to go to that activity, I'm not thinking, oh, I want to go to Blender. I'm thinking, oh, I want to go to the activity that feels like this and is on a desktop that's in this position. So I'll just go to the desktop. I won't even think to go to that specific desktop. My brain will just automatically use muscle memory to press the correct hotkey to go to this desktop that has this activity, rather than, oh, I want to go to Blender. That doesn't really ever happen, you know? So this is kind of useless, and maybe I should remove it, being real. Old habits there. Press meta 1. I did use the meta plus numbers sometimes, but I severely underused it. So meta alt apostrophe is maybe hole up instead. And hole up is this. That's what I call it. It's now on meta 7. So a bit more involved kind of hotkeys and actions are now on meta numbers. And they used to be on meta plus function keys. So like meta F5, meta F6, meta F7, meta F8. If you've been a stream/VOD watcher for some time, you might see me use them to like essentially pause screen key while I'm entering a password. Because one time on stream, I actually accidentally showed you my sudo password, which is hilarious. Yeah, so now it's on meta 2 to close it. Now I'm pressing keys and you can't see what they are. I know, right? Like, it's hilarious. And meta 3 like opens it. And let me do it smartly. I just mentioned showing you my password. Let me do something and then explain it, because doing and talking about it is difficult. Okay. I have a feeling that my solution won't work. I'll explain it. So now meta 4 is toggle do not disturb. The reason I did this is so that in case I had any personal notifications, you wouldn't see them. But I have a feeling you would indeed see them. Well, yeah, thankfully that just wasn't an issue. Because for all I know, there could be a notification with my mom saying in Russian, oh, like, I don't know, wash the kitten's, like, plates. Yeah. And now something more exciting. Meta F5 use my Oclaner program to put 3 random words into my clipboard. Let's look at my clipboard. It does not have 3 random words in it. I press Meta 5 and now it does, and I can just paste them. Pretty much the entire use case for it is so that I can create ChatGPT threads without having to think of a name. That's pretty much the entire use case. I press Meta 5, boom, boom, start it, you know? There are, I'm sure, I hope, places where I could use this feature as well. Just doesn't really come up that often. And by the way, Oclaner is a very nice program that I underuse, but you could do something like Oclaner joiner like this. Let's actually just show it in the terminal. Boom, and it gives you 3 random words joined together by a hyphen or a dash. I use this in one of my functions that turns a bunch of videos into MP3s and renames them randomly. I will not explain why I'm doing that kinda often. It's personal. But yeah, Oclaner is like very nice to have reasonably random words displayed in a title. Oh, in a case that you like title case, lowercase, uppercase, and joined however you like. By default, it's 2DW, I don't think works. Yeah, it doesn't. By default, it's spaces. I have a whole video on that. Let me actually, let me actually give a link to that video. Oclaner. Boom. Right, so Oclaner. That's, and we come to, I think, no, not the last hotkey, almost the last hotkey, Meta 9. Which, no, it doesn't just make the screen black. I'm not sure what you're seeing to be... Wait, what? It fixed itself for a second there. That's weird. Yeah, Meta 9 doesn't just make the screen black. It would be useful if I made it, like, set the screen black for you guys in case I'm doing some password inputting and I don't particularly want to show you my password or something of that nature. I haven't made that hotkey yet, and I should probably finally make it. Make an OBS hotkey that stops sharing screen. Yeah, so that would be useful indeed, but Meta 9, what it actually does, it toggles the compositor. Now, most of you, including me, very recently ago, don't know what the fuck a compositor actually is. You might have heard about it, that it's a part of Linux in some way and does something. So, the compositor, let's go to the settings and look at it more concretely. Well, actually, effects is going to be a more helpful place for us to look at. When you go to InKD specifically, but it's probably a similar case in other desktop environments, you go to desktop effects and you have a lot of desktop effects. Something like this, right? The nice animation. All of this is actually done by the compositor. I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong. So if you disable the compositor, what is supposed to happen is that now all of those animations and stuff don't work, rather than fucking making my screen black. It's not the intended effect. So you might say, if it doesn't work, why do you have a hotkey for it? Because it does work somewhere. Once again, this desktop is usually for Steam and a game. Every single game, fuck, that's a whole nother fucking thread. I wish I could like real-time create threads in my speech so I can then come back to them, you know? Despite using Anki, I don't have a good memory, especially when it comes to talking. I'll straight up just start a thread and forget to finish it. Yeah. So, all of my games didn't work in full screen. They did in windowed mode, but it felt kind of and I wanted to use full screen for the most part for games, and I couldn't really. I use ChatGPT and Find, which is also ChatGPT by the way, but a search thingy that uses ChatGPT, very, very useful, to try to figure out what the issue was. Like, why couldn't I play my games in full screen but only windowed mode? It told me that, oh, it's probably your drivers for the GPU. Like, it's a driver issue. I was like, okay, fine. Looked around what other drivers I could use for AMD, installed some other ones. It fixed the issue sometimes for one game, which is not very good, right? But the issue still persisted. But then, I think I either saw a solution. I'm not actually sure how I figured it out, to be fair. But turns out I couldn't full screen because of the compositor, which was wild to me to realize. Yeah, so if I disable the compositor for a game I'm playing, I can now use full screen again. And also important to remember, currently I have tiling on, right? So we have two windows side by side. When you open a game, it will still open side by side rather than being full screen. With Cronkite specifically, this is the behavior. So you have to actually remember to make it monocle instead, so it's like taking up your entire screen aside from the toolbar. And in that case, it actually works correctly. So, using the right layout, plus suspending the compositor, together make my games work again. And let me show you what that hotkey is, or rather, how to set it. Suspend compositor. Boom. So suspend compositing is what you would search for to make this hotkey in case you're also having this issue. And old habits, they will eventually fade away. Oh, I actually closed it. Yeah, especially if you have consequences like this. Let's move this here and make it smaller. It's weird that it doesn't just kind of like scroll, you know? Let's look at history. Endeavor OS. Let's try to look at it. Boom. I am such a nerd that I actually made a forum post on the Endeavor OS forum explaining this issue and explaining how to fix it. I'll give you a link even if you want to look at it. Has a bit more information, but the main idea is there. Yeah, I'm such a nerd. I literally made a fucking distro forum post. That is so lame. That is almost lamer. Exactly. That is almost lamer than me remembering the distance and velocity of every single hook in Terraria. Almost. Wait, which did I say is lamer? I'm actually not sure. What do you guys think? Like, what is lamer? Remembering the stats of every single hook in Terraria by heart? I think there are like 30 of them. 27. There are 27 of them. See, it's even lame that I remember how many of them there are. Or making a fucking forum post. Not looking for help, mind you, giving help. Looking for help is like pretty lame already, pretty nerdy. But giving help is a whole another level. Insane. This is probably super loud. Yeah, so meta 2 closes screen key, meta 3 opens it, D&D, random words. Meta 6 is this window, which is sometimes useful. Ooh, I should probably move it to meta alt 6 or something, because I then probably want to be holding alt, so I get like letter thingies. Let's do this actually right now. It's, I forget how it's called, menu. Here we go. I guess that was that easy. Meta alt 6, let's apply and change the, oh wow, I need to get used to this. Oh yeah, those are all of my cards for every single NPC, and which NPCs they like, which NPCs they don't like, which biome they like and dislike, as well as their arrival like conditions. I love this shit so much. You have no idea. Window operate, yeah, window operations menu is now meta alt 6. Cool. Do you play some type of music when using Anki? Not always. Hold up. It depends. Like, on my mood, there are 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there are 3 different types of sound that may be like currently active for any like piece of the day while I'm at the computer. 4 actually. So the main one is me just watching content straight up. So I'm like watching the 146th episode of Brotato by Retromation. Then the second one is music, which is just my like general music. It's so unusual for me to be using new hotkeys. Boom. Let's do it this way. So yeah, my usual music, 3 ASMR, and 4 a podcast. I won't always want to be listening to music when I'm doing Anki, because I kind of like need the extra brain power sometimes, but it really depends on what hotkeys I'm actually, what cards I'm currently reviewing. If it's something like the default deck, or the hotkeys decks especially, then no, not really, probably not. Or rather, like, I don't care to have full focus because they're pretty easy. But when it comes to remembering NPC interactions in Terraria, Morse code is surprisingly easy. Or remembering hex codes, yeah, I might turn off the music. But for the most part, it's fine, and I can just listen to music quite normally. To remove the spinners out of my computer, it'll resolve both my cold environment plus the noise. It took me like 3 seconds to get this joke, right? The fucking spinners. Remember those in like 2016? It's an actually cool one. It's not you just using weird symbols that are difficult to read. Your gimmick is now just confuse the autistic girl even more. But like smartly. Yeah. For the most part, music is like fine when doing stuff. But it depends on how much focus I really need. If I'm doing like a more real, I guess, or important project, and it's like a difficult part of it, something like trying to think of the correct architecture to use for the project, then I'll probably turn off the music to really have a think. But if it's like, oh, I'm implementing the 6 thingies that I've already made all the interfaces for and it's very easy, yeah, it's like music time. I made the first letter of the English lexicon. Oh, I did not get that. Yep, I did not get that. Lol. I thought that your gimmick is like being silly, because you're saying that, oh, we should remove the spinners out, taking the important part of like ventilators, I think they're called, of your computer, and making a joke that, oh, they're actually useless and they're making a lot of sound, I should probably remove them. And like, that's the joke. I thought it was this. I will literally become the most autistic person on earth. I will win. I will explain every joke. I will explain every joke, including mine, immediately. I will not wait. Yeah. And by the way, in terms of what music I listen to Necro Trap. Necro Trap and Trap Metal. I love it so much. I have 50 playlists of it with 5,390 songs liked. And it's not like I just add anything and it keeps there. No, I delete songs very liberally. Which fits. Liberally, lol. Yeah. Let me just give you a link to my best playlist. I'm just probably going to like stay active unless I fuck something up. Boom. If you want to check out what I usually listen to. I could turn on some music, but I would probably need to put on headphones and then figure out if it's too loud or quiet for you, and it's kind of a hassle. I bet your autism by watching this. Okay, yeah, you're super right. Okay, yeah, you won. But to be fair, Sometimes, say I get a new comment, right? Or maybe I need to remember what's in a certain VOD to make sure I'm setting the right link. So I may come across watching my own VOD, and I have this in my head that, like, streaming is mostly for me, and it's not that great content. But when I start watching my own VOD, it's like actually entertaining. I consistently get surprised figuring that out. Like, oh, I'm actually kind of good at this. What? You know? It's surprising to me, but it shouldn't. Because if it's so surprising to me, it's even more selfish to just be like, oh, I'm like creating content, whatever. But yeah, it turns out it's kind of nice. Or maybe I'm just that egocentric. Or both. If you try to speed run your yawns, you'll have to yawn again sooner. Hold up. I have a thing for this. I don't? I don't have a thing for this? Well, that's terrible. I thought I had a thing for this. Let's look for it. I don't have a thing for this? That's terrible. Basically, the GIF where Ghana is writing with fire. Genshin Impact Cosmic Horror. You don't say. I love how, like, words just stop having meaning if they're from a community that you're not a part of. You're probably looking at this meme, right? Or this one. Alright, let's get to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Guys, new settings dropped. New Anki settings. Let's go. Let's look at them. I changed my settings. Let's look at them. So, FSRS, right? Last two streams, I talked about it in varying degrees of, like, talking about it. What used to be the case is in the old scheduler, the one that's been there for like quite a long time, new scheduler now, FSRS. On the previous, or the one before previous stream, I talked about not being able to, or rather, let me say it wrong first and correct myself later, not being able to set multiple learning steps of multiple days. So if we type in 1 day, I know, right? I love settings so much. Which makes me realize, like, how did it take me 20 years to realize I'm autistic? My favorite thing, probably overall, is settings. I shit you not. Like, waking up in the morning, seeing the sun. Okay, why am I just listing things I hate? I actively hate the sun. Let me try to think of something that I actually like. I hate watermelons and the melons. Not a huge fan of pickles because they're usually kind of bad. I like the idea of pickles that are just usually not well made. It's way easier for me to remember what I hate rather than what I like. Basically, imagine something that I actually like. I like settings more. Probably. Yeah, so when you set a learning step of 1 day, which you used to do on the old scheduler, it says when FSRS is enabled, learning steps of 1+ days are not recommended. So what we used to do on the old scheduler, I like settings more, I think. That's a good question. They're close, but I like settings more. That fits into the definition of settings, you know? I definitely like configuring Vim more than using it. Let's be real here. I spent like a lot of hours configuring Vim. So yeah, I like settings more than using Vim, which is hilarious. We would set multiple learning steps, and it was, for me, 1 hour, 1 day, 3 days. The idea of this setting is that when you press again, you see the card in 1 hour. That's what I did, but I'll come back to why I no longer use this. Then 1 day, so the first time you press good on a new card that you haven't pressed good yet on, you will see it tomorrow. And then once you see it tomorrow and press good again, you will see it in 3 days and it graduates, becoming a mature card where now, if you press again hard or easy, you change the ease of the card, changing the multiplier of its intervals. So apparently, that's not really how it works anymore. It was 20 minutes, 1 hour, right? I'm pretty sure it was. That's not how it works really anymore in the new scheduler, FSRS. And it says not to use multiple days learning steps, like for a few reasons, and we'll actually go read about them to be like more specific. So the reason why we did learning steps in days in the old scheduler is because of something called ease hell. Ease hell would happen if you make a card mature too fast. I have a joke in my head. I will not say it. It's too much. It's really too much, but it's really funny. Trust me. You could probably think of it too, to be fair. Okay. Okay, yeah. So, ease hell would happen when you mature a card too much. Not too much. Too fast. Before properly learning it. And then, once it's a mature card, every time you see it, you press either again or hard, decreasing the ease of this card and decreasing the multiplier of the intervals. And then once you finally learn this card properly, now when you press good, the interval doesn't increase that much. So say you pressed again on a mature card many times in the old scheduler, you press good. Okay, the interval is 1 day. You press good again. Now usually, if the ease is normal, you would see it in 3 days. But that fucked card that you pressed again on many times, you now see it in 2 days. Not that big of a deal, right? Okay. You press good in it again. Well, shit. It's like 2, maybe 3 days again. So it's even lower, where a normal card would have gotten to 7 days already. So the scaling changes massively, and the ease will not change unless you press easy. But because it was difficult for you to learn this card to begin with, it's unlikely for you to be easy. So this card was not properly learned and its period is now fucked and you see it too often, but you don't know it well enough to change its interval massively. And that is ease hell. When this happens to too many cards, you're in ease hell and you see cards way too frequently. So the thing is, with FSRS, that is not longer an issue. As they said, they might be lying. I'm not entirely sure why it's not an issue anymore, but they said so. And that's part of the reason why they don't recommend using multiple days learning steps anymore, which is why I now have 1 hour as the single and only good button. So the card matures immediately within a day if I eventually get it within a single day. The 20 minutes could still stay an hour like it used to, but I changed it to 20 minutes. And the reason for that is that when it used to be 1 hour, that means that when I press again, I see a card in an hour. And I could see the same card not that many times in a day. It's not usually that immediately as the clock hits, I immediately go to Anki and do so every hour. It's not really how it works. I might go eat, maybe do some programming, do like anything really, and then come back to Anki. Multiple hours may have passed, possibly. And I don't get to Anki that many times in a day as a consequence, because I need to wait at least an hour, and if I have waited at least an hour, I probably waited more than just 1 hour. And because of this, I was really wishy-washy on a lot of the cards that I learned. Because, don't close it then? I don't close Anki. Wait, what? Yeah, it's not like about the window existing. It's about time passing and me just remembering to go to the window. The time counts properly regardless, like you don't have to worry about that. You can even like go to your phone after syncing and the time is going to be correct. That's like not an issue. Yeah, so not seeing a card enough times in a day to properly learn it from the start, because it used to be 1 hour here, it did me a disservice. I thought it would help me learn things better, but I think it's actually made it worse. Because like I see a card in an hour and then maybe I don't get to it again in that day. I see it tomorrow and I'm like, huh, what? Because I didn't see it enough times, right? Like, what? Press again. And I'm like really wishy-washy and don't return to the cards, making full use of my memory to the greatest extent, which I should be doing. But with 20 minutes, I am far more likely to still be at the end of my memory for the card, so that it's efficient to actually look at it again. While being able to do that many times. Just do them in just 24 hours. The entirety of them. Like, all of my cards every single day. Do you know how many cards I have? I even don't. Will you let me... What? What? Why doesn't it let... Okay, whatever. Let's see how many cards I have. Just all decks. And I wonder what's a way for us to like look at how many cards there are. Because if you select them all, it doesn't actually show you. Oh, I have 944 cards. Huh. You have 6K? Or maybe someone that you know does. Yeah, so with 20 minutes, I get to repeat a card more times in a day. You're wild, wow. But I feel like I'll pretty fast get to that point too. It's just a matter of time. I really like memorizing things. So 20 minutes has been working slightly better for me, maybe even moderately. I feel like I'm overall more confident in the cards that I remember. Yeah, so it's working a bit better for me. And 1 hour to keep with the theme of not tomorrow, but kind of like today. Because you press good and you'll see it in an hour, and if you press good again, it matures. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So I also changed the insertion order. Actually, before we get to that, let's read FSRS and the manual. Let's read the part that actually mentions the difference between the older scheduler. Yeah, so the free blah, blah, blah is an alternative to Anki's blah, blah, blah. By more accurately determining when you're likely to forget, it can help you remember more material in the same amount of time. The setting is shared by all deck presets. FSRS is currently as it was only integrated into Anki recently. Blah blah blah, new options. So it doesn't actually explain how it determines when you're likely to forget, and it will often make ridiculously big intervals, which you look at and you're like, no way I remember it after all that time. But I haven't been using it for long enough to really tell, so I'm still experimenting with it. Okay, so FSRS options, we'll get to this. Where's the thing that matters, basically? Maybe down? Yeah, here we go. So relearning steps, or just learning steps of 1+ days are not recommended when using FSRS. It was my entire question. So the main reason they were popular with the old one is because repeatedly failing a card after learning could reduce its ease a lot, leading to what some people called ease hell. So they're aware of this issue, they're like interacting with the community, and they're like, they clearly know about it and they did something about it. Apparently they never they say this is not a problem that FSRS suffers from, and they never fucking explain how it does so. They just said, don't worry about it. I mean, I'll trust them, but I'll eventually read more about it to learn why it's not a problem. Because what do you mean not a, like, why is it not a problem? Because maybe it actually is and you're lying to me. That is always considered. Like, you're not ensuring me, I guess. You're not proving it to me. It's weird to not do that. By keeping your learning steps under a day, you will allow FSRS to schedule cards at times it has calculated are optimum for your material and memory. So instead of graduating to a specific interval, which you used to be able to set, it now thinks of an interval for you, depending not on ease. Ease is no longer a thing as a stat. Difficulty is. What the difference is, practically, I have no clue. It's just a different number with a different symbol next to it for me. But maybe it functions differently, and probably it very much does, but I don't know how so specifically for now. Yeah, another reason not to use longer learning cards steps is because FSRS might end up scheduling the first review for a shorter time than your last learning step, leading to the hard button showing a longer time than good. Yeah, and that can actually also happen even in the old scheduler. If you use my settings, I'm pretty sure, or my old settings that I showed off some stream ago, it can happen as well, which is silly but still has a practical use case. Also recommend you keep the number of learning steps to a minimum. Evidence shows that repeating a card multiple times in a single day after you've remembered it does not significantly help with memory, so your time is better spent on other cards or a shorter study session. And yeah, I'm not sure if it's FSRS doing its wonders or what it is exactly, but my study sessions have been getting, like, they got shorter for what it's worth. But I need to remember that I don't have this feature anymore. Part of the reason they did so is because for most places, except hotkeys, default and programming, but stuff like Terraria, stuff like Morse code and hex, so the most difficult things for me to memorize, they used to be like 5 or 3, and for furniture it was 10, which is crazy now. Now, I set most of them to 1 per day. So just learn 1 hex per day, 1 Morse code per day, like 1 boss summoning item, and so on and so forth. Which definitely helps, first of all, in actually properly remembering everything and not getting overwhelmed, and also with spending less time reviewing, while still having the guarantee that I will eventually remember everything. So reducing the workload like this has helped me quite a lot. And there's this setting that you probably shouldn't change until you've done Anki for quite a long time. It is desired retention. So basically, what percentage, 92 in my case, of cards do you want to be pressing good at? Interestingly posed question, right? So by default, it's 90%. It's set so that the intervals are such where you will be pressing the good button 90% of the time. I increased it to 92 because I can afford spending a bit more time reviewing cards to ensure that I get them 2% better. There's a downside though, and it's pretty big. This graph that we scrolled past, let's look about it. That's not a thing. Desired retention. Desired retention controls how likely you are to remember cards when they are reviewed. So 90% chance of remembering them when they come up for review again. And look just how much this shit changes. So if you do 50%, you interestingly spend more time than something like 80 or even 85, I think. So the best place to be in is 80% to 95%. So here we are at 90%. Let's actually draw a line. We are fuck. That's very bad. Hold up. Let's draw it again. Close enough. So 90%, the default setting, which I don't really recommend changing, is around 1.5 units. 95 then jumps to 2 units. That's a pretty damn big difference. And going like that far, I'm not sure yet that I need to. So I did 92, which is around here, and that is very hard to see. Let's use black. Here it is. Boom. So it's around here. So it's still bigger, but not that much. And actually tells you what kind of situation you get yourself into. It says a 100-day interval will become 78 days. Kinda goes to show that this is actually a huge difference. So just 2% you would think, right? But it's 78 days now. Quite a bit less. And you will eventually notice it. I'm trying to like reiterate as much as possible that I don't recommend jumping to this immediately. To give you a even better idea, do 99 and it's like, well, goddamn. I very much understand the desire to ensure that you remember everything perfectly. I super want that as well. But taking in account efficiency, after all, makes more sense. Because if you remember everything, it probably means that you remember some things, or most things, way too much. When instead, you could be getting, in my case, 8%, but by default 10%, which is the recommended one. 10% of cards wrong. That means that you're not like overspending your time. You're very efficient about memorizing and remembering things, rather than being like very upstuck about it and trying to waste a lot more time for a little gain. So yeah, basically those 2% are there for me simply because I'm autistic, and it's like integral to me that I remember that the amethyst hook from Terraria has a distance of 18.75 with a velocity of 10. You know, like it's very important to me. So I decided that the 2% was worth it, but definitely don't jump in changing that setting as the first thing. Use Anki for quite a while, feel things out, change things up, and then once you realize that, yeah, I overall like am able to spend a bit more time and effort to be a bit better, then sure, go ahead. Okay, in display order, what I used to have for new card gather order is, let me try to remember, I think it was random notes. So essentially, when you see this number, which is blue, and go in to learn new cards, it would just pick 5 random notes, therefore cards as well. So if you add, like, let's say you added 5 cards which are Terraria chairs, 5 cards which are Terraria tables, and 5 cards which are Terraria pianos, right? You could get any of those 3 categories randomly, rather than first going through all the chairs, then through all the tables, and through all the pianos. I recognize that for most decks, I actually want to go through the new cards in order. Especially with something like hooks, just trying to remember every single distance and velocity based on no information, like based on no context, is a lot more difficult, I imagine. But I am now remembering hooks with the context of hooks that are close to them. So remember that the default hook is 18.75 and 11.5, right? I think that was the first hook that I remembered. And then next day I get a new hook, and it's the amethyst hook. And I'm like, okay, the distance is the same as the default hook, 18.75, and it's less fast, it's slower than the default hook. I didn't know that. And then it's way easier to remember the new stats for this new hook. By the way, velocity is 10, compared to 11.5 for the default hook. Like, it's way easier to remember because I have a frame of reference, and if I'm just throwing random cards into my face, and I just kind of have to memorize rather than having like interconnectivity helping me, you know? Which is why I now use ascending position. Descending position is also valid, actually. Like, you always learn the most recent card that you added. So I may change to that in the future. Who knows? Yeah, so in hooks, that's helping me out a lot currently. And I should have done that with NPCs, because remembering likes, dislikes, and biome preference randomly by random NPC has been a lot more difficult than if I could like form an overall picture and form my own mnemonics per NPC, you know? So it depends on what kind of things you're learning and whether you're adding cards in chunks. But for me, ascending position works better, I'm pretty sure. And there's a trick that you can use. Let's go to Terraria Furniture, for example, right? Go to the browser. Let's say like added all the things, added all the bathtubs. And the way that I do it, like literally adding every single furniture item, would be too much, and it would waste my time and energy too much, because they mostly follow the same recipe, just with different materials. So the way I do that is I just remember how to make a general toilet. You generally make it at a sawmill with 6 material. Nice, and with this information, I can then remember how to make a certain furniture set. And let's go look at a card for that. It will say furniture at the end. God damn. Where is it? Here we go. So for example, how to make spider furniture. The material for that is spider nest block, and it doesn't use some specific crafting station. For something like steampunk, I also remember the crafting station. So let's say I want to make a steampunk toilet. I use this card to remember that I need cogs, and I need to craft the thing at a steampunk boiler. Okay, now I remember, how do I make a toilet? Oh, it's 6 material, right? Yeah, it's 6 material at a sawmill, usually. But since there's a special crafting station, I remember that I need to use that. Cool, and now I know how to make a steampunk toilet without making a card specifically for it. I am remembering rules rather than specifics. But there are also specifics for me too. Because some specific items don't follow the rules. There is no pink brick furniture set. So you can't just assume everything exists. So that's why it's there. Obsidian furniture also needs hailstone and a different amount of obsidian. So the exceptions are also there. And the whole reason I'm talking about all of this is that I did not add all of these cards in order. So the most important information here is 1, how to make every furniture set, and 2, how to make every furniture item. And then after it, we can go through the more specific items, right? But I already added all the cards. How do I ensure the newest card that I see is going to be the more useful one? You press on a thingy and press Ctrl-Shift-S to reposition. So it was added like after quite a lot of other ones, but you can reposition it to be like, I guess in this case, the oldest new card. But basically, you will see it first if you also have ascending position like I do. But let's actually try to figure out what these words mean, because I've just kind of been pressing enter, but maybe it's actually useful. So Q top, basically it's on, like, it might be the first card, honestly, which is probably not the case because, you know, unsure what this means. What this may mean is that these cards share like tier 0 basically, and then you're like tier 1 and so on. And step, I'm guessing, is like ranking within a certain level, a certain rank, which is start position. I should probably learn about this through the manual, and once I do, I'll explain it in better detail. But for now, you can just know that you can press Ctrl-Shift-S while in the browser to make sure that the card gets seen a bit quicker. So if I do go to furniture, it has reviews. So yeah, let's go to global. I guess I haven't moved those. That's the only one. Okay, so here, boom, we can see that launch temporary terminal. What if we go to global and I do, for example, like what's quite a bit more useful? Did I change this? Not yet. Okay. Like, okay, yeah, this. Boom. We place it. I'm not sure that it works like I think it will just now. I'm trying to figure it out too. Yeah, here you go. So basically it's now the card that you see first. And interestingly, once again, it's like from like experience, but not from knowledge. Can I see CSS on your card? What is that font? These two? I'll get to that, sure. And I also Yeah, I went through this on the last stream, but I'll show it still. Yeah, so for example, I want to remember what monocle layout is. Second, so I do this, go back. We still see kill window. So kill window is meta caps lock. Oops, meta caps lock. Yeah, I remembered it. And see, we see monocle layout. So essentially we put it in a tier that then still gets ranked. You know? So it's not like we reposition one card, reposition another one, and now that is the most recent one. It still keeps the ranking like in a useful way, in a way that you would actually want to use, rather than the more annoying one that would like kind of reverse the order. It won't, which is really nice. Okay, so let's look at that. So for basic, let's go to fields. We have front Ubuntu Nerd font and back Ubuntu Nerd font for the editing. And in cards, nothing here, nothing here. And styling, it's Ubuntu Nerd font, 22 pixels, and that's it. For code, that might have been what you saw there. JetBrains Mono NF or Nerd capital F font, if you're using an older AUR package for the JetBrains Mono font. And I forgot to rant about it, so let me do it after I return. I use Arch, comma, by the way, and I updated today. I have this AUR package, which actually, okay, I have this AUR package that has a Nerd font variant of JetBrains Mono, right? It got updated. It's all right. I reboot my system. I go to look at VS Code, and the font is weird. I'm like, huh. It definitely didn't look like this. I go to my terminal, and the font is weird there too. I'm like, what? I go to fonts. I see like JetBrains Mono Nerd font. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's right. And then I come to find out they fucking renamed the font. It used to be Nerd font. It used to be spelled out. Now it's just NF, and they just decided to do this. And they just decided to fucking rename the font. So it broke for my system. It broke for VS Code. It broke for Terminal. It broke for Discord. It broke for Anki. And you know what's the worst thing about it? It probably broke somewhere else and I don't even know where. Because I might have changed the fonts somewhere like hyper specific to it. And I looked through my dot files to see the changes of fonts that I have backed up. So I changed some there, but I'm probably missing something. So this is incredibly annoying. My second arch issue so far. But then you might say, well, it is from the AOR after all. It's like done by users, so it's kind of to be expected. It's like part of the risk. And yeah, that was my thought too. Like, this is pretty damn annoying. How dare you do this? But also this is from the AUR, so like it's understandable. It is not. It is not from the AUR. It's in the fucking repo. And they did this shit. What the fuck? It's not even by some asshole developer. Well, it is, but it's in the repo, not the AUR, not some random dude in, I don't know where, fucking Alaska. I'm gonna rename the font. No, it's like more serious than that because it's in the repo. A lot more effort went into its getting in the repo to begin with. And somehow it didn't came to their head that renaming a font is a fucking terrible idea. I hate it so much. Yeah, so the font is JetBrains Mono and F now. More specifically, so basic is Ubuntu font. It's for both front and back. Code is JetBrains Ubuntu, JetBrains, Ubuntu JetBrains. This is specifically for hooks. I'll actually show it to you, it's pretty cool. Or maybe I showed it already yesterday, or last stream, I'm not sure. Toad is a thing, I don't remember. Let's look at it. Let's look at what it is. This is JetBrains Mono NF for this. And in fields, we have both of them to be JetBrains Mono. So basically, in fields, you can change what font is used when you edit a card. And when you press cards, you can change the HTML for both front and back and change the CSS, where here you can change the font that is used to actually render what you see. So you can change the really awful looking Arial. Okay, it's not that awful, it's just not my favorite font, you know? I would rather to use my system font. Yeah, so you can change the font here, font size, which lets me now essentially zoom in on key, while I usually can't, because then my tiling window manager breaks. So I can do it this way through font size. Yeah. About hook, it has 3 things. I don't remember if I showed this already or not. Maybe I have. Well, it has 3 fields that you all fill in, and the card ends up looking at like this. So you, in the front, you put the name of the hook with the PNG. Then in the second field, you type in the distance of the hook. In the third field, you type in the velocity of the hook. And it ends up being this single card. And in terms of styling, I just add it in a div. Yeah, just add it in a div. So the way it looks is we do hook to hooks, boom, like amethyst hook 18.75 10, and it just creates a card that has the words distance and velocity automatically. I don't have to re-enter those words over and over again. So this is a use for note types that you can create for yourself, because they can be certain presets for certain batches of cards that you want to add. They're very useful like that. Fenrir, did you mean like the Anki card? By the way, maybe you meant something else, and maybe I never answered your question. Okay, cool. So Anki, new settings, cool note types that you can create, and that you can change fonts in both editing and preview mode. New global hotkeys, how they're better, more useful, more usable. Yeah, I think after 2 hours, I needed 2 hours to talk about everything that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I think I'm done. I think I talked about everything that have changed in my setup since the last stream, and I hope it's going to be helpful to you guys to make your setup a bit better. Maybe grab the ideas and to implement them in your own way. Thanks for watching.